English translation, 241st Contact, Part 1. Monday, 3rd February 1992, 23:33 hours.
Certain circumstances prevented me from coming here earlier.
What matters is that you came here at all, and that fact makes me happy.
The joy is also worth mentioning for my part. And surely you will also be happy about the many greetings I should order from my two daughters Sim, Ya, Se, and Plaja. Also, Asket and Nera send you their greetings, as well as Quetzal, Taljda, and Manara, and all others. Also, the spiritual leadership of Era sends you love and good wishes and greetings. Many people greet you although you only know them by sight, or they only know you by sight or hearsay. They all have the same desire that I should express to you their connection with you, Edward.
Thank you. I am very pleased, and all the dear wishes and greetings touch me deeply. It is peculiar how deeply these wishes and greetings touch me, really very peculiar.
Everyone will be very pleased to hear this.
Please, dear friend, pay all my dearest greetings and wishes.
Of course I will do that.
Thanks, but now I have to ask you questions again.
I will be happy to answer your questions, but first I would like to ask you something, if this is not outrageous of me.
But Ptaah, neither a request nor a question from you can be impertinent.
I would desire a sip of peach wine, if I could ask for it.
But certainly, that is not a question. Wait, here, a glass for you and one for me. Now I will get the wine, which I put outside to chill, because I myself drink a glass every now and then, if I feel like it. Well, here I am again. If you allow me, I will pour it right away. You know, I thought to myself that you would certainly like to have some bottles of this wine. That is why I also provided a box of 6 that you can take with you. How did the wine taste with Quetzal, by the way? But now cheers.
For the good, just refreshing. Well, when Quetzal heard from me that I had tested the wine together with you, found it to be very good and received another bottle from you as a gift, he could no longer be deterred from tasting the bottle I had brought with me to him.
A huge tasting, a whole bottle like that, I would like to say. And did he find the wine as good as we did?
Certainly. He found it as refreshing as we did.
Then everything is in butter, and the old word comes true again. De gustibus non est disputandum. There is no arguing about taste.
At least in this case it is true, even if I do not always have the same opinion about it.
You may be right about that, especially when I think about how many human beings on the earth suffer from loss of taste, because their taste senses are completely or at least to a large extent destroyed. That is where you can really argue about taste.
That is right. Just take French cuisine as an example, whose composition is often absolutely inedible.
I know that when I think of rice casimir, which is seasoned with pineapple, or other dishes where meat dishes are mixed with berries and fruits or seasoned, then I feel sick.
The nausea also rises in me when I think about it. So let us keep quiet and not talk about these impossible things anymore.
As you wish, although this would have been just the opportunity to talk about the culinary cruelties of the gourmets. But let us not do that, and so I can put my first question straight away, concerning your statements about the planet racing behind the sun at high speed.
Your question refers to the planet that is not visible from Earth because it travels around the sun at such high speed that it always remains hidden behind the sun? What do you want to know about it?
There is a lack of clarity about the enormous speed. It is usually the case that the further a planet is from the sun, the slower it orbits around the sun. Why is that not the case with this planet? Why is it much faster than usual, and what is its name?
This planet in terms of its enormous speed, is indeed a phenomenon whose secret we were able to fathom only a little over 76 years ago. Once again, we had to realize that the wandering planet Destroyer had also brought its dangerous forces into play on this planet. The planet Kathein, as it is called in our records, hidden behind the sun, was touched by the SOL system at the 10th to last passage of the Destroyer through the SOL system and torn into its gravitational force field, but then broke out of the force field again and maintained its almost normal orbit around the sun, but at an enormously increased speed, while the Destroyer continued its pre-drawn orbit and broke into the solar system, causing destruction or changes in many places. Since then, the planet Kathein itself has been orbiting the sun in the form and at abnormally high speed mentioned above, but slowly moving away from the solar system and entering the attraction area of a wandering spiral arm of a black hole that will sweep the planet with it later this year. It is the same spiral arm that also took the sand and dust accumulations of the planet Venus.
When will the rip-off happen?
According to our calculations, this event will take place on the 16th of June.
Is Kathein one of those two planets that we have not discovered yet, and that we call Uni and Transpluto?
No, the planet Kathein has nothing to do with it. It is also without any life of any form.
And the spiral arm of the black hole, will it be even more effective in our solar system?
No, because if there are not unpredictable changes, then the spiral arm collapses with the torn path of the planet Kathein, and again becomes one with the hollow funnel of the dark hole, or even the black hole, as the Earth humans call these structures. Each black hole is usually a funnel-shaped structure of rotating form, which has wandering spiral arms, which often extend very far into free space and even have distances in light years calculated. In rare cases, we ourselves have measured such matter rippers, as we call these spiral arms of the black holes, in lengths of up to 8.7 light years.
And the black hole to which the spiral arm belongs cannot be dangerous to Earth, or even to the SOL system?
Not the black hole itself, no, because it is too far away from this system. Spiral arms could be dangerous, however, if they spread again and approach the SOL system, which is not very likely.
Very reassuring to know. It would not be fun for me to find myself part of a black hole. But now a further question. This time it refers again to Boris Yeltsin. Have you in the meantime gained some new knowledge regarding himself and his machinations, as well as regarding the stability of the CIS, as the Federation likes to call itself?
I can still remember your earlier assumptions that you made on the 18th of May last year. You were right. Yeltsin is now in the process of harvesting those fruits everywhere where Mikhail Gorbachev has nurtured and cultivated them in laborious work and sacrifice of his powers. After he first had to plant, care for and raise the corresponding seedlings laboriously and under many dangers for himself. As you predicted, the Russian people will slowly come to terms with reality and recognize Yeltsin's incompetence and lies and intrigues. But I will tell you a little later about these things and about our foresighted insights.
Can you not tell me about it tonight?
You misunderstand me, dear friend. By later, I was thinking of tonight, only some time later.
Oh, please excuse me, I really misunderstood you. You know, sometimes I do not quite get along with your time terms. In a short time, it can mean that you mean a few days or several months. So later can mean in a few days or weeks or at a little later hour, as you say now.
I understand.
Of course, because once you speak according to your concepts of time-feeling, and another time you go according to the concept of time-feeling that prevails here with us.
Your objection is correct. This error is also known to us, but we repeatedly fall for it as a result of the fact that we have to concern ourselves only in a lesser wise with the earthly form of the concept of time.
Of course, you are mostly elsewhere where you live according to your concepts of time. That is understandable, and I do not want to blame you. It is not that important either. It would be more important to know whether something is finally being done to eliminate Saddam Hussein, because he poses an inexorably growing threat to world peace and the ecological security of Earth. I have made some calculations in this regard, and they have resulted in some rather malicious things.
Work is being done on the Earth in the direction of eliminating Saddam Hussein, with the Americans in particular wanting to take action in this regard. However, there are no firm plans in this respect, unfortunately, because the danger of Saddam Hussein grows daily.
That is what my calculations show. The killer has already gotten so far again that he can strike at a neighboring country. It is incomprehensible to me that the secret services of the relevant states have not yet learned of this, and that the relevant armies have not yet struck again to do the full work necessary this time. This may sound quite warmongering, but it is by no means so. It is a very urgent necessity to prevent very bad things and to save human lives and the world.
This is true, even if many humans of false and effeminate humanity and unrealistic views are of a different opinion. Earth humans live on an Earth that is inhabited and ruled by still very barbaric human life forms that murder and kill each other for the sake of profit and greed, for power, and for the sake of fulfilling their emotions. And this applies not only to Saddam Hussein, but also to the Americans, Israelis, Palestinians, and others. If in the process falsely informed, falsely humanized, effeminate, religiously misguided ones, and degenerate world do-gooders cry out for peace, love, justice, and humanity in the form that violent criminals and mass murderers, etc., are simply to be left to their criminal actions and left unchallenged, then this corresponds to a criminal irresponsibility without equal, which is no less violent than that of those who are violent criminals and mass murderers.
I know, we have talked about this before. Nevertheless, it will be the case that all these false humanists and false do-gooders, who are religiously and falsely humanely misguided and falsely informed, etc., will be the same. The tedious and the murderous will cry out against our words when they become acquainted with them. This is because they understand neither the creational natural guidelines nor the actual laws and recommendations of the life, and thus also not the laws of self-defense. This is in contrast to those who simply cry out for murder and manslaughter and for the death penalty, and who glorify violence and war. These also do not know the creational natural laws, and thus not the law of the logically necessary violence in the case of self-defense. But there is no point in continuing to talk about this, for it is impossible to teach reason to lunatics. Let us therefore turn our attention to things that may be of use. My question refers once again to the AIDS epidemic. You said last year that this epidemic would continue to rise sharply. Do you have any new calculations, forecasts, or simply clarifications about the reality of the situation?
In this respect, I can give you some information, namely those of the state of reality. Since our conversation on the 18th of May last year, the situation has worsened drastically because now 91.3% heterosexuals are already carrying and spreading the AIDS epidemic. The infection has also taken a rapid form. But this is logically explained by the fact that, of course, the more that sick people carry the disease through their irresponsibility, the more infections occur. The forms of irresponsibility are also based on having emotionally gotten very badly out of control of the good human nature, such as through hatred and revenge, indifference and wantonness, etc. Many deliberately spread the disease out of hatred that they themselves were infected, which is why they want to contaminate as many as possible with the disease. Because they do not allow the healthy to be healthy and to live, because as carriers of the disease they themselves are doomed to death. If they themselves cannot live on, then others should not be allowed to. This is the motto of these mad AIDS patients. The infections which occur out of revenge show similar or even the same tendencies. In addition to all these mentioned infection incidents, there are also criminal infections, which are becoming more and more prevalent. For example, for some time now, criminal organizations have been deliberately infecting uncomfortable confidants, those working at cross purposes, unwilling ones, or otherwise unacceptable persons with the AIDS virus in order to eradicate them from the world in order to not have the murder be recognized in this form. The rule here is that the persons to be infected themselves are unconsciously infected with this disease, and that only in very few cases does a conscious infection take place. This is the latest form of perfect murder on Earth by criminal elements or criminal organizations. A fact that is unfortunately still unknown in official form and a crime that is becoming more and more widespread. Our research has already revealed several cases in which spouses brought their spouses, who had become tired of them, together with AIDS-infected persons in a criminal manner and persuaded them to enter into sexual relations with their spouses, but without the spouses being informed from the other side that the acquaintances were carriers of the AIDS virus. Thus, the spouses who had become troublesome were contaminated and fell to their death, while the criminal spouses could celebrate their perfectly successful murder. A kind of murderous killing of a troublesome spouse, which will be very difficult to prove as murder, as well as the actions of criminals and criminal organizations. Unfortunately, there is also a tendency for these forms of murder to spread rapidly and to be imitated throughout the world. For according to our findings, these murder practices are already being practiced in 47 countries around the world. Your homeland, Switzerland, is unfortunately also one of them, for there too such murders have already taken place in large numbers. However, these murders are not or only extremely difficult to prove, which is why the murderers go unpunished, quite apart from the fact that this type of murder is still unknown in the fight against crime. Furthermore, with regard to the AIDS epidemic, it must be said that in 24 to 30 months from today, it will be expected to be the main cause of death in certain circles of certain Earthlings, at least for the age groups between the 16th and the 55th year of life. Unfortunately, this will not be enough because the AIDS epidemic also brings with it other factors of evil, such as tuberculosis, a disease that is once again spreading and is infectious. This previously very dreaded disease, which the Earth human had got well under control, is once again on the rise and is also on the rise very quickly, simply because of the AIDS epidemic, which promotes this disease and against which the conventional and new drugs are becoming increasingly ineffective.
Your words anticipate a gloomy future on the Earth. I guess there is nothing or not much you can do about it, right?
Unfortunately, not yet in medical form. Unfortunately, also not as a result of the unreasonableness of the know-it-alls, the false humanists, the religiously lost and the do-gooders of the world, who also reject the best safety and prevention measures, because, in their sick thinking, they quite simply describe reasonable protective and prevention measures as inhuman, and for these erroneous views still find enough followers who support them.
Unfortunately, your words are only too truthful. In my opinion, self-defense measures, which would have to be carried out without pardon, would also be appropriate to combat the AIDS epidemic, as well as the drug epidemic. But the effeminate and the false humanists and the religiously lost and the religiously mad, etc., on the other hand, cry out for censorship and murder, and thus breed the drug epidemic and the AIDS epidemic even further with giant steps.
You say what we have known for a long time and what corresponds to the actual truth. The Earth humans do not know the responsibility of fulfilling the creational and natural laws and recommendations, thus also not the duty of fulfilling the creational law-directed evolution. False humanity and religious delusion are in Ausartung, the act of getting very badly out of control of the good human nature, of the main motives of the false world of thoughts and feelings of the Earth humans. And in it they are absorbed in softness and erroneous views about the value of life.
Exactly. Your words actually say everything. But this truth does not only refer to the AIDS and drug epidemics, but also to many other things, such as the fact that the human being gradually destroys himself or herself if they simply listen to the erroneous teachings and claims of certain scientists. A few days ago, I read a small article in the newspaper in which a maniac with a doctorate claims that humans have a daily vitamin C requirement of only 75 milligrams, and that this quantity is fully sufficient to cover the entire body's requirements. For my part, however, I know that the human body needs an average of 750 milligrams per day, which can increase depending on the condition of the body.
We have talked about this many times, but we have never given very precise information about it. But this is what I would like to do. In terms of the human body's vitamin C requirement, as it is given on Earth, the average value moves at 750 milligrams with a body weight of 60 kilograms and light activity. This corresponds to 12.5 milligrams of vitamin C per kilogram of body weight. During heavy activity, the body's vitamin requirement increases to 14 milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
And how does the measure then behave with medium activity?
A medium-heavy activity is the same as a heavy activity.
A person weighing 70 kilograms would have to consume 980 milligrams of vitamin C per day.
This is correct, but it is only a guide, because the rule states that a 150 milligram increase is useful, so 150 milligrams should be added to each calculated result.
For a person with a body weight of 70 kilograms, the required quantity would then be calculated at 1130 milligrams per day.
That is correct.
So the measure of 750 milligrams is on average only valid for a body weight of 60 kilograms and for light work. Correctly, the vitamin C requirement must be calculated according to kilogram body weight and after heavy work. Most people fall into this category. Very few people actually perform light activities.
Also, this corresponds to correctness.
Vitamin C deficiency does not only affect the immune system, but also many other negative things appear, such as hereditary damage, eye damage, etc. Could you perhaps say something concrete about this?
I cannot get too detailed, because on the one hand this would take too much time, and on the other hand I should not reveal too much knowledge.
A few details are enough for me.
Then listen. Vitamin C deficiency symptoms are not as harmless as Earth humans assume. Likewise, what the responsible scientists of the Earth propagate concerning wrong quantities of vitamin C needed for the human beings of the Earth is not harmless because, by their wrong data and wrong research, damage results which is caused in the human body, and diseases, etc. are forced, which could be nipped in the bud and destroyed. Men as well as women endanger their offspring already with conception acts, if the man or the woman or both together suffer from vitamin C deficiency. Offspring whose parents suffer from vitamin C deficiency at the time of conception are at risk because their immune system becomes unstable and susceptible to allergies, ailments, and many diseases. Even birth defects of innumerable forms and all sorts of other evils appear, including various cancers that could never occur if the progenitors did not suffer from vitamin C deficiency. First and foremost, DNA damage occurs, which then has lifelong negative effects.
DNA is the basic molecule through which genes are passed on.
That is so, yes. Vitamin C deficiency is an evil that can also lead to severe menstrual cramps in the female sex, but also to severe eye ailments. The poor healing of wounds is often a sign of vitamin C deficiency, as well as the poor healing of diseases. However, it must not be assumed from my remarks that vitamin C alone is decisive for human health and life, because that is not the case. Truthfully, many other vitamins are also of great importance, as are minerals. But no other vitamin and no mineral has such an important function for the human being's life and for their health as vitamin C, which has to be supplied to the body in relatively large quantities, which is unfortunately only possible today on Earth through special vitamin C preparations, because food has not had sufficient quantities of this vitamin for a long time. This is no longer even true for fruits and vegetables and the like.
Yes, that is probably true, because even scientists are talking about it.
But it is still criminal how scientists continue to trivialize things, even though the situation regarding vitamin C deficiency is extremely serious for many human beings. This is true not only in this respect, but also in the AIDS epidemic, where so much is irresponsibly trivialized, allowing the epidemic to continue to spread unchecked, as demonstrated by the unchecked increase since our conversation on May 18, 1991. Since then, 1,327,000 new AIDS cases have been reported worldwide, which are expected to rise to over 2 million by the middle of this year, close to the 2.5 million mark. Worldwide, to this day, there are 16,897,416 people infected by the AIDS epidemic. Unfortunately, however, the authoritative health organizations of the Earth humans assume much lower figures, which makes the matter in and of itself, and the control of it, particularly worse. The truth is that there are around 5 million more AIDS-infected people on Earth than is assumed, while the number of new cases of infection is also much higher than assumed.
These are things that are unfortunately commonplace on the Earth. But let us ask a question. All around the world, people are calling and propaganda is being made that condoms should be used for sexual acts, because only these would protect against infection. What is to be thought of it?
These efforts of official and church as well as AIDS aid organizations are well known to us. However, it is very misleading, because on the one hand, it is not taken into account that an infection can also occur through kisses with blood-saliva transmission, and on the other hand, condoms may offer only a very small percentage of protection, because the mucus fluids and the sperm spread everywhere in microscopically small form, and condoms are smeared with them inside and outside, even if they are handled so carefully. However, if blood mucus fluids or sperm come into contact with AIDS viruses, they automatically form infectious factors, making condoms unsuitable. In this case, condoms only form a sham protection.
Then the use and propagation of condoms is in certain cases no more and no less than an alibi exercise.
One can also express it thusly. The only real and 100% certainty against AIDS infection is the fact of total abstinence wherever there is not a 100% certainty of freedom from the disease, by which I mean unless there is a 100% certainty that the disease is not present. But this means that Earth humans must reconsider their ethics and begin to live according to a clean morality. more intensely and strictly than ever before, if one can speak at all of this having once been the case in a really serious and intervening manner.
You are thinking of the ancient Hebrew peoples, of Sodom and Gomorrah, and also of the European syphilis age, when those afflicted with syphilis wore wigs to hide the disease because their hair fell out.
I thought of that. AIDS, however, is much more insidious than syphilis, which in the end was also contained by the earth humans, but unfortunately not by the acquisition of a clean morality, but by pharmaceuticals. Of course, it is fair to say that the application of a somewhat stricter morality also played a minor role in the containment of the disease, but this does not carry much weight.
From your words, I hear that you also mean that to fight the AIDS epidemic, a very authoritative standard of strict, clean ethics would be necessary.
Despite my knowledge of your subtlety, you never cease to amaze me. With my words, I really wanted to express exactly what you just said. I was just about to interpret the meaning of my statement. In fact, in order to combat the AIDS epidemic in the Earth humans, moral morality must first and foremost be addressed and made to function. Earth humans must once again reflect upon morality and truly begin to live ethically according to it. This is really the first and most important point of disease control and the control of the epidemic, which must ultimately be carried out by means of suitable pharmaceuticals. First and foremost, adulterous sexual acts must be combated, curbed, and eliminated, then the unnatural male and homophile sources of danger and the dangers of drug addiction and prostitution.
But there again the effeminate, the do-gooders of the world, the sectarian twerps and the false humanists, etc. speak up, who call a rigorous crackdown to contain and exterminate the evils mentioned by you Inhuman and Loveless. Quite a few of them are themselves homophiles, addicted to drugs or adulterous sexists or prostitutes. It is not uncommon for such creatures to cry out against rigorous measures because they themselves are profiteers of adulterous sex, of homophile sexual acts, of prostitutes, and of drugs and drug addicts.
You say that which sadly corresponds to the bare truth. On the earth, however, there are unfortunately many kinds of things which are very regrettable and of negative value. This is also the case with the most varied languages, which are often so poor in their possibilities for terms and word combinations that they fall into the realm of inadequacy for a good understanding. Also, the English language belongs to this because, even though it is valued as the most important worldwide language, it is one of the poorest and most inadequate. You have given to us the English and the German version of the text, torture, death penalty, and overpopulation, whereby you have encoded the German language version. With help of the High Council, our authoritative linguists have now received a very lengthy instruction in the coding of your writings for all of the languages common to the earth. Regarding this, a computer especially programmed for this purpose was drawn on for help, in order to code your writings into the most varied earthly languages, as you have done and will further do with your work in the German language. The disappointment of our scientists was unspeakably great, as they had to determine that it is impossible to code your writings also in earthly languages other than German. Several computers finally simply refused the service, while various highly specialized linguists, in complete exhaustion, had to give up the attempts of coding the writings in languages other than German. A really equal and correct result was provided only by our languages, back to the languages of their origin. Altogether, almost 18,000 linguists occupied themselves with the problem, however, entirely without success. Astonishingly, the English language is such that the normal terms for the language common to the land for England and America are so primitive and falseness-expressing, and the essential values are of such false meaning that coding can in no wise succeed. The single possibility of a half-worthy coding, which strikes the mark in some measure, came only from the creation of new words and terms, or out of various words put together, or from German words and terms simply transformed into English. But English-speaking ones are, through this poor language, not capable of understanding such innovations of words or terms or word transformations out of another language, as they are also not capable of grasping and understanding the simple joining together of words and therefore word combinations. This is only possible in the required form with the German or Swiss German language, and therefore this can also only be understood by human beings who have a command of both of these languages or one of the two.
We have known that already for a long time, my friend. Yet in spite of this, we are continually annoyed by this, if we must translate our writings into English. English speakers simply interpret quite clear concepts differently to what the term actually states. They despise normal, proper words and concepts as aggressive or contemptible. For very many words and concepts in the German language, there exist no kind of words or concepts of equal value in the entire English language, as well as in many other earthly languages, neither in the form that they are of the same value as would be expressed in German, or that they could describe the German word idea even slightly, even only in the most distant form. I thereby occupy myself with the thoughts that we allow our texts simply to be translated according to the more bad than correct use of any foreign language, as the primitive earthly languages permit, with which there is the incalculable danger that the writings could never be correctly translated and exhibit mistakes and falsifications, which must inevitably call forth misunderstandings. We would thereby simply follow the order and the determination that nothing is allowed to be published in a foreign language if it is not published side by side with the original text written in German. It is this German text which alone is also coded, and is therefore useful, no matter whether it is now read by the person or read out aloud, and so would be heard, whereby it plays, indeed, no role whether the text would then be understood or not. The read or heard coded words are indeed important, because thereby, even through the reading or hearing of the texts of the writing, the required impulses would be released in the addressed human, whereby it then automatically frees the purpose-directed impulses out of the storage banks, and makes them begin to work in the concerned human being.
You therewith tell me nothing new.
I have indeed not assumed that. But listen, if I search for the English word for folk, then it does not allow itself to be found in the entire English language use, even less the effective word Mensch. For Volk, the English speakers use the word people, or for Menschen, peoples, and so forth. However, in both cases, the code values give data which describe something completely different, and indeed very negative things. Roughly speaking, one can say that the English word people provides the value of carrion feeder, while in the German language the code value of the word and concepts Volk again gives the value of folk people. Folk.
Our language scientists have explained this to us in similar form. Your word concept was, at any rate, not carrion feeder, but rather carrion feeding.
But which concept comes out the same in the end? Because the German language allows itself to be arranged such that the word use has more forms which can be utilized for one and the same situation. So you can say, for example, hyenas are carrion feeders, or birds are grain feeding. Hyenas are not only raw flesh feeders, they are also carrion feeding. But this only entirely allows itself indeed to be so formed with the German language, and with the Swiss German, if I thereby only bear in mind the earthly languages. In Old Lyran it also allows itself to be done, and also in Bavi.
Certainly. The same goes indeed also for our languages, as I already explained to you. Because, already from the earliest time, it was recognized that the languages of the New Age would no longer allow themselves to be coded in the required form. It was therefore determined, at that time, that the mission of the New Age would be fulfilled through the German language and must be carried forth worldwide, whereby also your mother language, Swiss German, must play a noteworthy role. A language that Svayath also perfectly mastered, as you know, and which he happily made use of if he was together with you. He often also spoke Swiss German with us, just for amusement, because none of us could understand this language. Before the setting of the determination 13,500 years ago, it was already recognized that one day the High German language of the New Age must exist on the earth, which alone would offer all possibilities of a perfect and all-expressive and all-explaining language. And so it has also come about. The German language is the only one of the Earth humans that can fully extensively clarify and explain the comprehensive teaching of the Spirit to the full extent, with all required words and terms and word combinations, as is possible in no other language of the Earth humans. The High German language is also the only language of the Earth humans that can be coded according to the determination, as is applicable to your texts and books and other works written by you which stand in direct or indirect connection with the fulfillment of the mission.
I think that from your words it can be heard that I am correct with what I previously said regarding the translations into other languages. Namely that the texts simply can only be translated according to the inadequate possibilities of the individual languages.
Yes, that is what I likewise want to say with my words. Also, the statement of the High Council is likewise clear, and therefore also the advice of the Arahat Athersata plane.
Wonderful. Then I am really happy. And certainly Heidi and Christian would also be happy. Because indeed we can all be spared very much work. I was always very grieved to have to wade through the English translations and determine that many words and terms simply were always false, and would not actually correspond to what was expressed in the original German text.
Many of our linguists also say the same or similar. 154. There are indeed those among them who express themselves in strong language like, "This English language has primitive means of understanding," and so forth.
Strong language means something different to us, dear friend Ptaah. We call that swearing, among other things, or tormenting, blaspheming, slandering, and so forth.
I do not master the German language as perfectly as you do, who is held in great respect by our linguists regarding your German language. They think very highly of you, and say that even in the German-speaking world, it is rare on earth to find such a good and high level of expression and fluency as you would find in German.
Quite a bouquet of flowers. Thank you very much, even if it makes me a little embarrassed, because usually I do not exactly bed myself in roses with my language. I tend to always sit in the nettles.
If you speak a hard language, then this corresponds to the necessity. The truth can never be spoken with soft and flattering words if you do not expect the words to be useless. Of course, you often speak harsh words, but really only when the situation requires it. Quetzal, for example, has already experienced this, but not without good reason, as we now know. But this hard language does not embody your essence, because it is completely different, as we well know. Even the group members know for sure that your true being is completely different from the one you play each. Time you go to court with the untruth orally or in writing and tear it apart like a piece of paper. And that, too, is not your true being when you become loud, when this requires the truth or simply the situation. All those who really know you from your actual side can testify that this is so. I know how often you have risked your life and your health for others without asking if you would ever receive any thanks for it. And often you have not received any thanks for it either.
Please, Ptaah, do not do that. These are things that do not belong here and do not interest anyone. It is and was my life, and I decide about that all by myself, and I will never ask for thanks. Gratitude has never been my métier and never will be. When I do something, I do it simply because it has to be done, and because it is my duty and obligation to life. So one does not need to talk about it and to discuss it.
It is unpleasant for you, I know. Nevertheless, I find that I had to say this once.
It is not only unpleasant, it is even embarrassing.
Your modesty, but I want to accept your wish and not talk about it anymore. At least not now.
Also not later, please, and also not in the future.
This will probably hardly be possible because certain things simply have to be said here and there, or at least once.
That is certainly not incorrect, but in my case it is.
I do not think so.
It is probably once again pointless to discuss why another topic should be addressed again. About 15 minutes ago, we talked about the AIDS epidemic, and in this context also about the fact that prostitutes, among others, are to blame for the spread of the epidemic. In this regard, I actually wanted to say something else, but it slipped my mind and has now come to my mind again. It is about the fact that I have seen and read reports on television and in newspapers that in many places children are forced into prostitution and then infected with AIDS in this lousy business. As bearers of this still incurable disease, they spread it rapidly by infecting countless people. It goes without saying that no distinction can be made between male and female infectors, because children of both sexes, girls and boys, are forced into prostitution. Particularly in third world countries such as Thailand, India, Latin America, and Persia, criminal and AIDS-infested child prostitution has become cruel and excessive. Especially the countries of Argentina and Brazil have to be mentioned, as well as Thailand and the surrounding countries, where child prostitution is particularly rampant. Often criminal organizations are behind it, which operate a proper girl trade and boy trade for prostitution and earn millions of dollars with it. But drug trafficking also plays a gigantic and unmanageable criminal role in these human trafficking businesses, because the male and female victims forced into prostitution are also forced into drug consumption and drug sales. These crimes, however, do not only happen in the countries mentioned, because the same is true of many so-called civilized countries, such as Germany and Switzerland, Austria, France and America, etc., only that these crimes in these countries do not become as publicized as those in third world countries, because journalists from the so-called civilized countries locate and uncover these crimes there and then publicly denounce them. But the silence in the absence of decorum remains about the fact that it is precisely because sleazy packs of so-called civilians from Germany, Switzerland, France, Canada, America, Sweden and Austria, Denmark and many other civilized countries greedily pounce on the young flesh of girls and boys forced into prostitution, that child prostitution can flourish and spread.
These criminal and inhuman machinations of Earth humans, who have gotten very badly out of control of their good human natures, are well known to us in this regard. Even wild, ripping animal beasts would never degenerate in this form. But human beings who have degenerated in this form no longer deserve the name human and belong to the last and degenerated scum and garbage that has ever arisen.
I agree with that opinion. I find that for these scum, excrement, and paragons of all degeneration, there is no designation at all that would be just good enough to describe these slime suckers, who have sprung up from a satanic fantasy and a nausea and vomit-emitting abomination.
Someone should imitate you for once. I will remember your words. They are as accurate and powerful as your immense vocabulary can make them. I have already said that your language and expressiveness are extraordinary and must search for their equals.
Please, not again. This praise gets on my nerves.
My words do not correspond to praise. You misunderstand. I only record one fact.
All right. I know you are never embarrassed about an answer. That is why I do not want to argue with you.
That would probably also be pointless.
Then I would like to ask you something again, which means I have several questions, if you allow me.
Of course.
Good. The first question refers again to Columbus, who in truth did not discover America, but practically only rediscovered it. At that time, he met the so-called Aborigines, as they say, but that is not true, because as you once explained to me, the Aborigines or the first peoples lived in America about 76,000 years ago.
That is correct to the extent that we can speak of larger groups of human beings.
Did human life forms develop just as independently on the early American continent and in South America before the continental drift, as was the case in Europe, the Far East, Africa, and...
That also happened, yes.
Well, then another question about the black hole or the dark hole, as you say. Can you and may you give more detailed information about it?
Certainly, in certain things.
Well, then it would be interesting and perhaps even important to know where the black hole is, or how far away it is from our SOL system. They once gave me approximate information about it, but I do not know if it really applies. From an exact specification, it would then be possible to calculate the length of the spiral arm that has afflicted Venus, and that will take the planet Kathein with it.
This black hole is located in the direction of the structure that you call M87, and that is about 5.4 light-years away from the planet Kathein.
And the spiral arm, it should be a bit longer because it corresponds to an arc, right?
Your assumption is correct, but the length of the spiral arm is only about 1 light-year longer than the distance to the black hole. But let me now explain some things that have been happening on the Earth for some time, or that will happen shortly. First of all, there are the incidents that have been going on for some time in Iraq, where hundreds of thousands of people have been murdered and buried by the order of the criminal Saddam Hussein, disregarding all human rights and humanity. This happened before the Gulf War, but since the end of it, these mass murders have spread. Furthermore, the racist hate groups that persecute, harass, torture, and even kill people of different colors are becoming more and more prevalent all over the world, particularly South Africa. America, Germany, and Switzerland are states in which these crimes appear particularly blatantly, although other countries show the same malicious machinations of racist and human rights violating groups. The governments and security organs of the countries concerned in this respect do not take the necessary steps in an assertive manner to end the evil, nor does the responsible rest of the world to finally put a stop to Saddam Hussein. But just as irresponsible are all those states which would have to bear the responsibility for the safety and health of the people, for example with regard to the cholera which rages in the Latin American states. The true situation is concealed, which also means that the danger of the spread of the prion epidemic or mad cow disease increases more and more. Truthfully, not only several hundred people have been infected with it to this day, but already many thousands of them. Due to the contamination, there is a danger that the disease will spread faster and faster, according to the snowball system, whereby the disease also threatens to be carried out into the vastness of Earth. It soon represents a danger that may compete with the malignancy of the AIDS epidemic. But those responsible for containing the epidemic are just as lax and irresponsible as those who would have to take very rapid measures to protect the ozone belt and curb CO2 production. Although the two epidemics are still not as bad as the overproduction of carbon dioxide, it will soon be too late to act, which is why radical measures are already unavoidable if a great catastrophe is not to befall the people of this world as a result of these epidemics. Rigorous measures to curb the production of carbon dioxide must also be the focus of attention for those responsible, including the ordinary citizens on an individual basis. Almost everything that humans produce also develops CO2 when these products are destroyed by burning. As a rule, however, the production processes themselves also develop CO2, as do all explosion motor vehicles and rectified engines of aircraft and ships, including jet engines. We have already said a lot about this, as well as about carbon dioxide production as an exhalation product of pets and humans themselves. The overproduction of human offspring and the keeping of useless domestic animals must be drastically restricted, because all evils that have arisen on Earth are based solely on the irresponsible mass of overpopulation by humans on Earth. This cannot be explained often enough and repeated and denounced again and again. The terrestrial human being must radically decimate his mass humanity by a suitable, worldwide and controlled birth stop, according to the principle which is known to you and which you have already mentioned in your writing several times. Pets must be eliminated and may only find a right to exist where they are considered real farm animals, such as sniffer dogs, avalanche dogs, and guide dogs, etc. The same applies to internal combustion vehicles, about which you have already written everything necessary on how everything must be handled. The steady and unstoppable increase in the mass of carbon dioxide can no longer be absorbed by nature and the atmosphere. The overproduction leads to extreme climate changes which cause enormous catastrophes on the Earth and increase and aggravate them from month to month. It is already the case that practically no coming year will take a naturally normal course anymore because, in the future, climate disturbances of the worst magnitude will slowly but surely take over the might. Snowstorms and snowfalls, downpours and floods will alternate with devastating dry spells and droughts that will make the land infertile. Cold and heat will begin an unnatural interplay, and violent storms of destructive form will shape the future. Food-producing areas will become desolate or submerged, while the seas will rise with the melting of ice in the polar regions, destroying inhabited and fertile land that is vital to human life. But even the Earth itself is beginning to rebuild itself more and more with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, as will happen in Switzerland in the canton of Graubünden and in England on the 17th of February again, and put people in fear and terror. For many years we have warned the inhabitants of the earth by presenting you the warnings and the facts, which you then published and also sent to the governments, etc. However, the success was in no wise pleasing and therefore not worth mentioning. Those responsible in all countries ignored your messages and laughed at you and us because they did not believe your words or our existence to be real and effective. This is not least also because on earth many kinds of swindlers, liars, deceivers and madmen, sectarians, fantasists, hallucinators, and many other poor misfits do their mischief concerning alleged contacts with us. Other and further alleged extraterrestrials and higher powers, and similar madmen who appeared and still appear, who with their lies and fantasies, etc., who sell the stupid for even stupider and shock and alienate the thinking ones with all of their nonsense. That, my friend, simply had to be said once from my side.
A long speech, powerful and good. I am happy about every word you have said that has made a lot of things clear. I am really happy about it. If I had asked questions about this, you probably would not have made such detailed statements, because you only ever give an answer to a specific question.
I am used to just giving specific answers.
I get it. You have now said so much about carbon dioxide. But this is only one of the evils and its connections, because there are many other things that also contribute to the destruction of the atmosphere. The entire environment, the planet Earth and life in general, such as CFCs and other gases, which the responsible criminals claim to be harmless, such as in the case of the various substitutes for CFCs. You did not mention that at all.
That was deliberate because we have talked about it so many times that I did not think it was necessary to make another reference to it. Of course, this is also of utmost importance, which is not recognized by the responsible scientists and rulers and is simply trivialized. Those responsible ones, worldwide, have not yet been trained in their actual responsibility to such an extent that they are able to contain and eliminate the threatening and already global danger through radical measures. They continue to practice only in big, stupid, trivializing, and useless speeches because they like to hear themselves speak, but without seriously tackling the evil of worldwide destruction. Boastful, arrogant, and self-important, they speak of multi-year plans, of scheduled times, during which the dangerous prevailing evils are to be contained. However, in their self-important and arrogant boasting, they overlook the fact of truth that only the fastest and most radical action can really help, and that multi-year plans are nothing but criminal and felonious alibi exercises that only benefit responsible politicians and scientists in the form of big salaries, which, however, cause fatal damage to the atmosphere, to life in general, to the planet, and to nature and the environment as a whole. Often we have already spoken about it and given advice, which you have spread worldwide through your writings, but the responsible persons did not pay attention to the warnings and advice, whereby the evils could still increase in the last years and have now reached a state which can no longer exclude climatic elements as well as atmospheric and other catastrophes caused by it. If even greater evils and catastrophes are to be avoided or contained in their ever-increasing form, then immediate radical measures are necessary, which must be carried out worldwide, starting with the decimation of the overpopulation by a rigorous worldwide birth stop, up to and including those small things which are regarded as absolute trifles with regard to the destruction and annihilation of the entire environment. Nature, life, the atmosphere, and the planetary protective belts as well as the planet itself. Nuclear reactors for energy production must also disappear from the scene as quickly as possible, as also must any nuclear bomb tests absolutely stop and never be resumed. The combustion motor vehicle traffic must be curbed just as drastically as the air and ship traffic of this kind. Smoke and exhaust gas developing companies and factories, etc. must be mothballed, as well as the production of toxic substances of all kinds must be stopped, at least in the form that is not absolutely necessary for the preservation of life. But you know about this as well as we do, and you have already written and distributed writings on it that clearly mention and list the necessary measures.
All well and good. Everything you say is true, but if the responsible scientists and politicians do not pay attention to it, then nothing can be done. They all simply believe themselves to be bigger and more understanding than they really are. Most of them are only big-mouthed, as you yourself said, simply intent on their own image, and fine speakers only to hear themselves talk on the one hand, and to feather their nests on the other. Only very few can speak of real responsibility. But these are then sawn off and silenced so that the irresponsible can continue to muddle through and retain their might.
You are better at putting the facts into the right words than I am. I will try even harder to acquire your powerful language. It is actually all thus as you say it is.
If only that would finally be understood by all those responsible for everything on the earth, the scientists and politicians, the military and the poison producers, as well as their customers and world poisoners, etc.
Unfortunately, It is to be feared that the real scope of all destruction and the real responsibility will not be recognized. Consequently, another time will not be acted upon as demanded by the whole situation of all destruction and the creeping danger of destruction of all life and the whole environment, etc.
The concept of the Earth-human sense of responsibility, in particular that of those truly responsible. The people themselves, however, do not think any further, for they still shout enthusiastically for all the irresponsible ones when it comes to getting them to the helm. Just as it happened with Boris Yeltsin, who greedily and intriguingly took over the helm in Russia, and sawed off Gorby, who could have avoided the crisis triggered by Yeltsin. Yeltsin, however, by his intrigues, was able to mislead the people and bring them to his side, which made him cheer and shout and made Mikhail Gorbachev second. It only amazes me how long the Russian people will let Yeltsin deceive them and lead them behind the light, before they recognize his lousy and power-hungry machinations and their inability to lead the people and the economy, and start to protest against him.
This will happen faster than you think, because already this month it will come so far that this will happen.
But that is good news. One more question about the explanations you made earlier. These climatic and atmospheric upheavals and the resulting catastrophes, when will they happen?
The beginning has already come about, and in the following years, the events will multiply rapidly. The growing evil will not happen as slowly as the irresponsible scientists and politicians claim, thereby deceiving not only themselves, but the entire humanity of the earth. The evils and catastrophes are in rapid advance, and already it has come so far that certain and quite malicious events can no longer be stopped and not even alleviated.
I can imagine that. But tell me, why do you not mention anything in connection with all the destruction caused by the Earth humans, which are already caused by all kinds of prevailing motorsports?
We have spoken and warned a lot about this as well, as you have stated and explained in your writings, that any sport that is performed with combustion motor devices and vehicles and aircraft that use the principle of the combustion motor must be rigorously banned. Also, in this case, urgent measures have to be taken, which will lead to an immediate and worldwide ban of these sports. This also applies to sports that damage or harm landscapes, etc., such as damaging, destroying, or harming meadows, forests, watercourses, the lives of individual animals or entire populations, the extermination of which is imminent in great numbers in the near future.
For example, by cross-country skiing trails and ski slopes, football fields and similar things, right?
That was the meaning of my words, yes.
The fanatics attached to these things will not be happy about these words in any wise.
That will certainly be so.
So let us go into battle when I publish this conversation. The sports fanatics will try to tear me to pieces, as well as the criminally responsible ones amongst the scientists and the politicians. But the same will also happen on the part of pet fanatics, who prefer to suffer from toxoplasmosis and slowly become stupid from it, rather sleep with cats and dogs, etc. in the same bed, or at least live in the same apartment. Not to mention those pet fanatics who munch from the same bowl as their animals. None of these irresponsible fanatics will agree to dismiss the useless pets. They will be mistaken in claiming their love for animals, like those madmen who believe that today's medical research can already do without animal experiments, which is why they want to ban all animal experiments for medical research purposes. Of course, animal experiments can be restricted, because, for example, for cosmetics, etc., such experiments are absolutely not necessary if they are not medical cosmetics. I find that such fools and lunatics, who reject animal experiments in general and at all in today's time, where Earth humans still have no other possibility, that such fools and irrational ones should actually make themselves available with their own bodies for medical tests and experiments. Certainly, medical researchers, etc., can already research many medicines and other things without animal experiments, but the main thing is still necessary with such animal experiments. On the other hand, it is especially those who reject animal experiments who cry out for help and murder when their family members, or friends and acquaintances, or even in the case of accidents or illnesses, they cannot be treated and provided with suitable medication. Perhaps precisely because no relevant animal experiments were possible for the AIDS in question, and for the medication required. But what is there to be angry about? Because idiots, weak-minded ones, and others who are unable to think logically, there are plenty of them on the earth, such as the xenophobes who have been up to their criminal mischief for years. Murdering foreigners, setting fire to asylum seekers' homes, beating foreigners to cripples, spitting at them and calling them names. These criminal creatures are just as bad as the racists. The groupings in this regard are quite diverse, considering that there are racists and xenophobes, asylum seeker haters and stranger haters, class haters and everything else in this field. Even if these various groups hold the most diverse views and live according to them, they all have one thing in common. Namely that they are haters of human beings who only accept themselves and glorify their own person. Regardless of whether it is a criminal xenophobe Streble or neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, or other members of some kind of national front, etc., as one such gang of criminals calls itself.
This fact is known to us, and unfortunately, I have to explain that such criminal machinations will expand more and more, because the responsible authorities do not rigorously intervene and do not separate the wrongdoers from society by appropriate measures, which could only happen within the framework of how our ancestors handled such things.
So very long-term or permanent deportation to remote and safe islands, where gender segregation must prevail, and where the wrongdoers must earn their living through hard work.
That is the meaning of my words. But as the situation looks like with those responsible ones on the earth, and especially in the so-called civilized countries, they have become too effeminate and false human, as they work for the good of such criminals, and degenerates rather still in their hands and in their sense, instead of touching them with hard hands and applying hard measures. As this is also done with drug addicts of all kinds, and with the members of violent criminal organizations, as for example, the most different forms of the worldwide mafia. As you once rightly said, all these criminals and felons are touched by the lax jurisdictions with velvet gloves and fed with the best food instead of being taken out of circulation by the hardest measures. This also applies to those who alcoholize themselves and then endanger or even destroy the lives of their fellow men with any vehicles, as it happened to your brother Carl through such a criminal human.
Unfortunately, yes. Also, this criminal got away with only a fine of 300 francs, without the guy having been further punished. Just think, a human life here in Switzerland is worth just 300 francs. To howl and roar. But our excitement in this regard is of no use, which is why we better turn away from this topic again. You told me that at a later point in our conversation you would tell me what the Ptaah volcano was all about, which you said was threatening to erupt. Will you now give me the necessary clarification?
For the time being, it is still of no importance, for the coming of the next time are really only threatening occurrences, which manifest themselves in earthquakes and the like. I really do not want to explain more until later. An eruption of the volcano is really not to be expected in the next weeks yet. If this comes to pass then, however, then a catastrophe results.
Fine, if you do not want to talk about it. Maybe you can explain to me why the human body gets tanned by the sun's rays. My question relates especially to tanning of the skin in light-skinned people.
The tanning of the skin is a defensive reaction of the body.
You mean that the tanning of the body is a defense reaction against UV radiation?
Certainly.
Interesting. Then the sun's radiation, the UV radiation is more dangerous than is generally assumed.
That corresponds to correctness, certainly. Even if the ozone protective layer is intact, tanning your body can be extremely dangerous. The danger of being attacked by black cancer and other evils caused by UV radiation also exists if the ozone belt is not damaged but fully effective. Unfortunately, Earth humans believe that solar radiation is harmless to the human body with an intact ozone belt. The rationality is unfortunately not yet sufficient to grasp the truth.
Belief and rationality are mutually exclusive, even if irrational philosophers claim that belief and rationality are not mutually exclusive.
That is no more and no less than an irrationally based phrase of human beings who do not exactly think broadly that denies truth, even if they call themselves theologians, pastors and priests or philosophers, etc.
Well said.